Our three teachers who are going to be telling you stories this period are, their photo is going to come up on the next slide. We have Ms. Nicholson. Come on out. Dun, 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 dun. Woohoo! We have Ms. Bosman. Oh, she has a fan club. Don't let that sway you. She might be lying. And we have Mrs. Singleton. She might be lying as well. Nobody knows. All right. In order to determine who goes first, we have an extremely scientific method. We toss a rubber chicken. So if we can have the three of you kind of line up, yeah, great. Now, Mr. Schmidt has never done this chicken flip before. It could go awry. Look out. But we'll see. Okay, so I've asked him to just kind of toss the chicken in the air, and whoever don't decapitate it. Whoever the head, whichever person the head is pointing to, is, no, it's not the feet. Stop changing the game. Okay. Whoever the head is pointing closest to is the one who is going to tell the first story. Please flip the chicken. Maybe do more of a, like... Okay. All right, Ms. Nicholson is going to tell her story first. Wherever you want to go. Yes, they should be. You can check them.
Okay. I woke up early on a hot September morning in 2009. Extra early today. Jim and I were on our first vacation together in Sedona, Arizona. I'd been looking forward to this day of the trip for weeks. The plan was to wake up at 5 a.m., long before sunrise, for a surprise he had planned. So naturally, I woke up extra early to make sure I did my hair, my makeup, to look perfect for the day. I thought, is it possible? Is today the day I get engaged? I glanced at my hand, and I imagined how a shiny diamond would look on my ring finger. As I finished getting ready, I took a few sips of coffee to wake me up before grabbing my bag and heading out to the car. I climbed in the passenger seat of the car, where Jim was waiting, and we were off, driving into the desert for a surprise. I nervously tapped my foot on the dashboard as we drove in the dark, his favorite band, Radiohead, playing from the speakers of the car. My stomach started to growl, and I suddenly wished I had stopped worrying so much about my hair and had thought to actually eat something for breakfast. I pushed the thought of hunger to the back of my mind and focused on the surprise as we continued to drive. We took a turn, and I started to see big trucks parked along the side of the road and a few cars in front of them. "We're here," he announced, as we parked behind them. Spread out in the dirt were what looked like giant plastic blankets, all covered with different radiant colors. I was confused. I thought to myself, where are we? Then I saw the giant baskets next to the giant blankets, and it hit me. We're going on a hot air balloon ride. This is definitely it. I threw on my sweatshirt, since it was still chilly before sunrise, grabbed my bag, and we started walking out to the hot air balloons. A greasy guy named Glenn greeted us, and he showed us the balloon with bright yellow and green stripes that we'd be riding in. Glenn then gave us a quick rundown of how the balloon tour would work. The hot air balloon goes up to elevations around 2,000 feet, depending on the wind, and will stay up there for about an hour, depending on the wind. Did he say 2,000 feet, I thought? Wind? My mind started to race, and I couldn't help but wonder how sturdy those hot air balloons really were. Again, I pushed the thoughts of fear to the back of my mind and climbed aboard the hot air balloon, my excitement quickly being replaced with nerves. No, fear. It was fear. The burner for the hot air balloon was ignited, and the air inside the balloon quickly began to heat and then rise, taking all the passengers along with it. We left the ground a little bit shaky, and I grabbed the edge of the basket to keep from falling over. We climbed higher and higher, the burner kicking on and off to help us climb and float. The view was unbelievable, nothing I could have imagined. The silence of the air around us was just as stunning. But the grumble in my stomach got a little louder, and as I stared off at the horizon, I started to feel a little bit warm, queasy. Sweat began to drip down the back of my neck, and I felt a little uneasy on my feet. The horizon started to blur, and I couldn't tell if it was me or the altitude causing it to do so. The voices of the people around me started to grow muffled. I could hear them, but could no longer make out what they were saying. I thought, this cannot be happening. Am I really going to faint at 2,000 feet above the ground on this romantic hot air balloon ride? I shook my head, hoping to shake the lightheadedness as well. But it was too late. As the other passengers hugged, took pictures, and admired the view, I felt my body grow weak and begin to slowly slither down the side of the basket until I just collapsed on the floor. The expansive horizon grew smaller and smaller until blackness, total silence. The next thing I hear is, "Marge? Marge?" I could recognize Jim's voice as he shook me awake. Yep, I totally just fainted in a hot air balloon. Greasy Glenn greeted me with a can of lukewarm pineapple juice and a pat on the back. Happens all the time, ma'am. How mortifying. Here I thought this was going to be the most exciting day of my life. Instead, this memory was replaced with a sweaty forehead, Greasy Glenn, and some warm pineapple juice.
I don't know. I can't tell if that's true or not. We have another chicken moment. All right. So if you have any questions for Ms. Nicholson, keep them in mind because you're going to have a chance to ask them. Let's have Mr. Schmidt stand in the middle of them so we can get our chicken to be a little more accurate. And go. Mrs. Singleton is our next storyteller.
As the sunlight poured down from the sky, I drove down my street in my typical suburban neighborhood. School was done for the day, and for once, my homework load was light. Pulling into my driveway, I noticed something next to our mailbox that was long, wiggly, and dark. My bright mood disappeared. Fear gripped my lungs. There was a snake in our yard. This wasn't any ordinary snake. Oh no. This was a big, vicious, poisonous snake. I knew without taking a closer look that our lives were in danger. After I pulled into the garage, my brother Greg and I raced from the car into the house. I slammed the door shut, panting. My hands began to shake. "Is that what I think it is?" I demanded. "I think so," my brother replied, but he didn't seem as sure as I was. We raced up to the second floor and tried to look out my bedroom window. And the angle wasn't quite right, though. We tried my brother's window, but the view wasn't much better. "You have to go out and look at it," I told my brother. "No way," he said. "You have to," I insisted, taking my right as the bossy big sister. Instead of walking out onto the driveway, Greg took the car. Yeah, he was just as freaked out as I was. He backed the car down the driveway, peered out the passenger window, and pulled back in. "Yeah, it's a snake, a big one. Maybe a rattlesnake," he told me once he was back in the safety of our house. "That's it," I said. "I'm calling animal control." The first time I called, I had to leave a message. So then I called my mom. My fear was growing. I had convinced myself that the snake was out to get me and my family, so I refused to let my dog out of the house. No way was I letting that snake near her. My mom assured me that she would be home soon, but I knew it would take her at least 20 minutes to get home from work. We didn't have that kind of time. So I called animal control again and left a second message. Then I called again and left a third message. Finally, after what seemed like years, animal control pulled up in front of our house about the same time my mom arrived home from work. I watched in absolute terror as the officer pulled out a long pole with a hook on the end. He walked over to the mailbox and captured the snake. At this point, my entire body was violently shaking with fear. My mom met me on the porch, and the officer approached us. I was now ugly crying. I mean that snot pouring out of your nose and you can't quite catch your breath, sobbing. The officer held up his pole with a long, black, rubbery item hanging from it. Is this some kind of joke, he asked. This is a toy, he said, referring to the snake at the end of his pole. Yeah, that's right. I called animal control 3 times because a child's toy was in my front yard.
All right. So now you have 2 stories to consider. Ms. Bosman is going to give you a 3rd.
My aunt and uncle go to their lake house in Michigan every weekend during the summer. I just finished my sophomore year at IU, and they asked if I would watch their dogs for the weekend. They usually take their dogs with them, but they were hosting a dinner party and didn't want the hassle. I don't know what kind of dogs they were, mixes of some sort, but one was big, horse-like, and the other was small, purse-like. Quite the duo, Camper and Chloe. I had a job nannying for the summer, and the kids' parents went to see a movie. When I got to my aunt and uncle's, it was a little before 10. They had left a checklist for me on the counter with things like fill the water bowl, let them run in the backyard for 10 minutes, and give them a treat. There was a $10 bill or $100 bill next to the checklist. I took care of the dogs, took a quick shower, made some popcorn, watched a little TV. When I was ready to go to bed, I triple-checked the locks, the lights, and the garage door, and headed upstairs with the dogs around midnight. My aunt mentioned that if I didn't want the dogs coming into the guest room, I could put the gate up. I didn't mind Chloe coming in, but Camper was really large, and without choosing favorites, I separated them. I put the gate up, left the guest room door open, and fell asleep. Around 2:45 a.m., I woke up to Chloe barking. I remembered my aunt saying that sometimes they do that in the middle of the night. Usually it was less than 3 minutes, and they would stop. If it's more than 5 minutes, they really need to go to the bathroom. It seemed like more than 5 minutes, so I started to wake up a little, and I noticed that the barking was coming from my left side. The door to the bedroom was on the right. All the left side had was a window, and then it clicked that Chloe must have been outside. I sat up and noticed Camper standing right at the gate. His big eyes were just glowing back at me in the dark. So seemingly half asleep, I started to walk towards the kitchen. As I got to the bottom of the stairs, I noticed that the kitchen light was on. I do not like scary movies, never really watch them, but just like every scary story should have warned me, I walked towards the kitchen. I saw that the back door was wide open, and I felt a breeze blowing in. This is when I was finally awake. I didn't know what else to do but walk back to the bedroom and call my mom. I woke her up and whispered, "I think there's someone in the house." She was incredibly confused, must have forgotten that I was staying at my aunt's, and said, "Yes, everyone should be home." I reminded her that I was staying at Aunt Jacqueline's, and it clicked. She told me to call 911 immediately. I could hear her waking up my dad as I hung up. I called 911, and before the dispatcher even picked up, I remembered I have no idea what my aunt's address is. I hung up on 911. Called my mom back and asked for the address. Called back 911. I was using the house phone, so they were able to track the address from where I was, and the dispatcher said that someone was already on the way. She stayed on the phone and told me to head to the closest enclosed area that was out of sight, and I went to the bathroom. I grabbed a blow dryer for self-defense. The dispatcher told me to stay on the phone until the police asked me to come out so they don't confuse me with a potential intruder. It didn't seem to take long for the police to look around. They came upstairs and briefed me on what they found. No sign of a break-in or forced entry. The back door was either open from the inside or unlocked from the outside, and there was a $100 bill on the counter. Nothing else was noticeable. My dad came to pick me up, and I went home around 4 a.m., terrified and confused. Everyone was so cautious around me for the next week. They said they believed me, but I also know they believed I left the door unlocked, and the wind just blew it open. I know I checked the lock. I wasn't trying to be nosy, but a text from my uncle popped up on my dad's phone about a week later. It said, "We have a theory." My uncle was a local firefighter and was talking with the police about what they thought happened. My aunt and uncle moved into their home about 20 years prior. They gave a spare key to the neighbors, and it was never really necessary for the neighbors to use. They used to be close. My older cousin and the neighbor's kid were around the same age. The neighbor's kid would have been about an adult, 30 at the time. So the theory was that the neighbor's son knew my aunt and uncle would leave every Friday in the summer at 4 p.m. with the dogs, and he would use the house while they were gone. He heard me walk in and probably was frightened, and then when I went to bed, he escaped. I think little Chloe got out with him.
All right. Mrs. Shanebeck, whose due date is tomorrow, because I know you're wondering, is going to give Mr. Schmidt one microphone. She's going to give the contestants on the couch a microphone. And now it is your chance to ask any of them. Jeez,
Hello.
you have a baby in your belly. It's your chance to ask questions of any of the teachers who are up there on the couch. You're trying to determine which story is the fake one. Looks like Mr. Schmidt has a question over on.
All right, so we are interrogating these teachers, but in a nice way, right? Okay.
Do you know what brand the pineapple juice was, or like the label that was on it?
I don't remember. I do remember that it was a small can, but that's about it.
We have one over here.
Did you take the phone into the bathroom with you when you were hiding?
No, it was the house phone that I used, so I just had to hang it up.
To Mrs. Singleton, where were you living with the snake incident?
It was Indianapolis, Indiana, where my parents currently live. Same house.
All right, question over here.
What kind of dog was Chloe?
9:30.
I have no idea. Small.
We have one over here.
How'd you stay on the line with 911 if you had to hang up the phone and go into the bathroom?
So I didn't hang up the phone. I just put it down and went into the bathroom. There was a cord, so I didn't hang up, but I knew where it was.
All right, more questions.
Over in the front.
Okay, yep.
So I forget his name, but the big dog, he wasn't barking.
His name was Camper. He was pretty much silent. He was just looking at me.
How many people were in the hot air balloon?
I think there was about 6.
That seems fishy. No, I'm just kidding. I have no idea how many people fit in a hot
Fish
air balloon.
love hot
There's
air balloons.
back. Mr. Schmidt, way in the back of your section.
Oh, way in the back. All right, this will take me about 10 minutes.
He's a slow-moving, lumbering man.
Can you describe Glenn, was it? The greasy man? The greasy
Sure.
dude?
Actually, I can, yeah. He was very tan, I think from working outside in Sedona. He was a small man with blonde hair. He was weathered, greasy. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but he was the guy that worked outside a lot, and he was short with blonde hair.
Okay.
No.
We have one over here. Go ahead.
You said that your cousin had been friends with the neighbors.
Yes.
What was your cousin doing when his parents were out of town?
He was like 30, so he didn't live at home anymore.
I'm going to come around. I'm moving around. There's a question over here, but I don't have stretchy arms. Where was it? You? Okay.
What color was the snake?
It was black.
How old were you when the snake incident happened?
I think that was my junior year of high school, so 16 or 17. I was driving.
That makes me laugh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you actually see the snake moving?
Not once.
This is for Miss Bosman. If your cousin was an adult and he wasn't at home, why was the neighbor who was the same age at home?
So this is like a whole other story, but he was known around town as a guy named Wild Thing, who just like lived with his parents. I think he worked at Mariano's. Yeah, I don't have a good reason, but he did live at home.
This is for Mrs. Bosman. How cold was it that night when the door was open?
I mean, it was during the summer, so when I was nannying, we went to the pool that day, but it had obviously dropped. I'm gonna say 65. I have no idea.
All right. It looks like we don't have any more questions. Do you feel like you have a pretty good idea? Oh, Mr. Tooley has a question. Of course you do. Wait, you need a microphone. Mr. Tooley had 1 hour of sleep last night because he has a sick baby at home.
Mrs. Singleton.
Yes, Mr. Tooley.
A few of my students and I are wondering, as a junior in high school, how do you not know, A, what a rattlesnake looks like, and B, that they don't really live, as far as we know, in Indiana?
Actually, they do live in parts of Indiana, but not that particular part. And it is just another example of how much snakes freak me out. When I was in preschool, they had one of those bring animals to school kind of events, and they brought around this little green garter snake, and it began pooping right about the time it was in front of me, and I freaked out, and that's my first memory of my snake phobia, and it has continued on. And if any of you ever put a toy snake or real snake in my room, oh my gosh, you will be in so much trouble. Let me just put that out there. So don't get any ideas, please.
Should not have said that.
Please don't. Please don't.
That
Seriously.
was a terrible call.
Okay. So we have a student back here who understands why you would have been freaked out by something coiled up, but he's still suspicious of your story. Just wanted it to be known.
This question is for Mrs. Bosman. How long ago was your story?
It would have been 2010 or 11, after my sophomore year of college.
Okay. You said he worked at Mariano's?
No, Wild Thing did.
Oh, okay.
What was your cousin's name and your neighbor's name?
So I don't know his real name, but my cousin's name was Sean, is still Sean.
Mrs. Nicholson, did Jim know that the hot air balloon wasn't going to be a good idea for you, or was it just not a good idea because of the stomach thing?
So I faint very easily, and this was his first experience of me fainting. It happens quite commonly, but this was his first experience, so he did not know about the fainting until then.
All right.
Mrs. Bosman, what exactly were you doing that night? Like, were you watching TV or reading a book? Like, what exactly were you doing?
I was watching TV.
Okay.
All right. We are going to vote. Here's how it's going to work. We are going to ask you to stand up for the story you think is the lie. So when I say the name of the teacher, you are going to stand, and Mr. Schmidt is going to go on stage and count one by one. No, I'm just kidding. He's going to get an idea of how many people are standing for each teacher. Remember, you are standing for the teacher whose story you think is a lie. If you believe that Ms. Nicholson's story is a lie, fainting in a hot air balloon, and not getting engaged that day, please stand up. All right. If you believe Mrs. Singleton's story about the Indiana resident rattlesnake is a lie, please vote. Yeah, okay, we got it. I didn't really mean count, Mr. Schmidt. And finally, if you think that Ms. Bosman is telling you a lie, please vote. Oh. All right, Mr. Schmidt, what is it? Okay, so the consensus is that Miss Singleton is the one that's telling you the lie. Could we please have the liar stand up? All right, so Miss Bosman, since you were the one who wrote the lie story, can you tell us how you came up with it? Are there any parts of the story that are true, or is it completely fabricated?
There's a lot of fabrication. I actually do like scary movies and like Criminal Minds, but I didn't think that was appropriate for like first period, like full Criminal Minds, so kind of scaled it back. But something similar did happen to my friend, and I believe she did just leave the door unlocked, like that there was never anyone there. But that's not as exciting of an ending, so.
All right, great.
Wild Thing is real, yeah. But from like a town in Indiana, actually, not Illinois.
Ms. Singleton, can you talk a little bit about the process of writing your story? Because I know you said you went through some revisions of it.
Yeah, so actually, if anyone out there from my college prep writing class, they know that I was telling the truth because I have told. Is Sarah out there? Do I see Sarah? Hey, Sarah. I told this story earlier this semester, and it went over pretty well with the class. So I was like, I think I might have a story I want to tell at Writers Week, and hopefully I'm not scheduled 8th hour. And then I drafted my story, and I shared it with Mr. Ebling, who's here with his class, and he is the best at giving me feedback because he will not sugarcoat anything, and he won't be like my mom who's like, that's such an awesome story, Anne, oh my gosh. He's gonna say like, I don't think this is working, and what about this? And I had a hard time with my ending, and he had me think about like, well, what's the point that you really want to leave people with? Is it the fact that you called animal control this many times? Is it the fact that it was fake? And like a couple other questions, and that really helped me with that.
Mr. Ebling actually is in the audience. So, Mr. Ebling, can you talk about what is it like, because I think our students even struggle with it, what's it like to read someone else's writing and give honest feedback?
It can be hard. I mean, Mrs. Singleton and I are really good friends, so I think it was easy for me to say something that might have been blunt to somebody else, but she understands where I'm coming from, and it really helped to be able to understand where she's coming from and know her really well. But I think one of the things that's hard about telling a personal story is like you want to control how you look, or like you are focusing on your point of view, and that can, for something like this, she really needed something that was like a truth that could be debatable. So it's just a matter of like finding that rather than like how she was portraying herself.
And Ms. Nicholson, you told a true story, but one of the characteristics of it that I liked is that you were really detailed about people in it and the pineapple juice. What made you decide to do that?
Well, I knew that I had to try to make it as real as possible, and so I was trying to remember all of those little details because it was from a long time ago. So I didn't focus on dialogue because I don't remember a lot of what I said and things that were said that day. So I tried to just focus on what I remember seeing and hearing, because anyone that's fainted, you can probably understand kind of the things that I said of that's what you remember the most. So I tried to just focus on like exactly what I remembered.
Cool. We have about 1 minute left. Ms. Bosman, I have one final question for you. How difficult was it to answer the students' questions when they were asking them?
I mean, someone caught me with the phone thing. Clearly I played it off kind of well, but it was, my go-to was just to say I didn't know.
Right.
But like Sean is my real cousin's name, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, give our 3 teachers a round of applause, everybody. And thank you again for being a marvelous audience. Have a great rest of your day.